Good Wednesday morning and welcome to Begin in the Word. Our text today comes from the Gospel of Matthew chapter 6, beginning in verse 19, where Jesus says, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." The eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how great is the darkness? No one can serve two masters. For either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. Here Jesus changes direction from what he had been talking about in the first part of chapter 6, talking about the way that we implement our righteousness, how we should not do it for public attention, but do it without any selfish motivation. And now he's going to turn his attention to our treasure, the things we value. In this section, 19 through 24, might look like three different sections of material that are unrelated. Laying up for yourselves treasure, the eye is the lamp of the body, and then serving two masters as three different sections. But the ESV groups it together, and I know commentators will group these together into one unit, and there's good reason. Jesus starts by talking about your treasures on earth, and presumably talking about money and possessions, and he ends by talking about those treasures, money. You cannot serve God and money, or mammon, which is just a Semitic word for money or possessions. So what we have here is that bracketing of material. He's going to start by talking about possessions. He's going to end by talking about possessions. And in the middle, he's going to talk about the eye. And I think we'll see as we go why Jesus makes those connections. So he says, do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, where thieves break in and steal. We can understand pretty easily what he means where thieves break in. We all know people who have had their possessions stolen. Someone has broken into their home when they're not there. They take things and they lose their possessions. And we know people who have endured that. The moth analogy here is maybe a little bit lost on us. In the ancient world, possessions often consisted of cloth and precious metals. And so you can see how rust relates to precious metals. And moth, or perhaps really the larva form of the moth, a cloth-eating bug, you can see how that was a legitimate concern in their world, in their dry climate where these creatures were common. So if your possessions consisted of cloth and of precious metal, moth and rust were legitimate problems for you. Thieves breaking in and stealing were a legitimate fear. Because on earth, all of this is temporary, not to mention one day we'll die and it will all go away. But even while we're here, it's temporary, Jesus says. So he says instead, lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven. And he's just got done talking about how that is done through the giving to the poor, through prayer, through fasting, through these spiritual acts by which we glorify and honor God and are drawn closer to him. We are laying up for ourselves treasures in heaven where moth and rust can't destroy, where it's permanent, where thieves do not break in and steal. And Jesus says something so important, so enlightening, because it shows us really the condition of the heart in verse 21. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And we've mentioned so many times here on the Sermon on the Mount that Jesus is talking about conditions of the heart. Wherever you put your treasure is, that's where you're going to think about. If you're worried and focused on your retirement, you're logging in, checking that 401k, you're worried about it because your heart's there, because that's where your treasure is. And so Jesus says, wherever you put your treasure, there your heart will be also. Which means that there's a practical application for us. Do you find yourself having a heart that is so drawn to the pleasures of this world? Then start investing somewhere else. If your heart is not where it ought to be, start investing your time and resources and energy towards the spiritual matters, the matters of heaven. Set your affections on the things above and not on the things of earth. You do that, you put your treasure there, you will find that your heart will follow your treasure. And then Jesus transitions to talk about the eye in a very peculiar transition. What does treasure and the heart have to do with the eye? And he says the eye is the lamp of the body. So if I can draw a little eye here, here's my eye. Light is shining in on my eye, and it is filling my body. It's filling my body with something. If your eye is healthy, or if your eye is sound, it's whole and complete, that word implies. If your eye is healthy, your body is full of light. So the things coming into your eye, don't interpret this biologically. That's not what Jesus is talking about. He's talking about your spiritual person. If your body is consumed with things that are from heaven, things that are from above, things that are good, if your eye is filled with these things, your entire body is filled with that. But if you cut off your eye from the light, if your eye is bad, your whole body is full of darkness. And Jesus says it's pitch black. Nothing good is coming into you, to your body, because you've shut off the window, the lamp, you've turned off the switch. And so the darkness is great. It's pitch black because there's no other way for light to get in the way Jesus is describing it. Jesus says the things we set our eye to, and interpret this both physically and spiritually, where the things you look at, but it's the things you long to see, the things that you fill your mind's eye with. Those things will fill your body and ultimately fill your heart. And so you can see where Jesus is connecting this. If you have an eye that's healthy, that's full of good things, your heart will be set on those good things. Your heart will be drawn to your treasure. But if you shut off your eye, your spiritual mind, from things that are good, it's pitch black inside, and there's no hope. Your heart will be filled with the temporary pleasures of earth that will be destroyed and corrupted. And then Jesus concludes, no one can serve two masters. So you've got to make a choice. You either will serve God or mammon or money. So money is a good translation of mammon, but mammon probably implies money and possessions, the entirety of your physical well-being. You can either serve God or you can serve money. You can have one of two masters. You're either going to hate the one, love the other, devote yourself to one, despise the other. Now you might say, no, I don't think that's right. I think I could serve two masters. The word master here, interestingly, is the Greek word kurios, or Lord. I can serve two lords, and I can get away with it to split my time evenly, and I think that will be okay. And if that's what you're thinking, let me pose this to you. Try to sell that to your spouse. Say, honey, I think I can serve as a husband to two wives. And you'll quickly realize that in her mind, you are telling her that you hate her and that you're in love with someone else, and that this is just a cover for you to feel better about it. And of course, she would be right. And what we see here with God is it's the same way. Either the entirety of our affections, our spiritual mind, our eye is drawn to the light of God, or the entirety of it is enslaved to possessions, to this physical life. You got to pick one or the other. You can't divide your time evenly. You might be able to have two employers, but you cannot have two lords and two masters. So Jesus says, make up your mind. Will you set your treasures, will you set your mind and your treasures on the earth? Will you store them up on the earth, or will you put your treasure in heaven and let your heart follow? And if you want to have a heart that is set in heaven, start by fixing your eyes on the things of heaven. Thank you for joining us this morning. Thank you for beginning today in the Word. And as you have started today in the Word of God, it's my prayer that you live out today in the Word of God.